Bienvenidas.
Bienvenidas, comadres and friends, to our February 2021 Tally Conference. This is Karen Gonzalez, Las Comadres para las Americas Denver Book Club Coordinator. We wish you and your familias health, safety, and love. We encourage you to put laughter into your life. Prayer and laughter help us relieve stress. We also want to take a moment to reach out to all our comadres, compadres, and friends in Texas who suffered during the snowstorm and power outages last week. You are in our thoughts and prayers. Podcasts are now being uploaded to our website. Please feel free to download to listen to any of your favorite interviews. Mil gracias to Comadre Dora Abreu for doing this labor of love for us. Our February 2021 Tally Conference features Book of the Month author Yaffa Santos and additional conversations with author Paola Ramos. First, a bit of history about our book club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York at Comadre Maria Ferrar's apartment. After a hiatus, it was restarted in March 2007. Comadre Johanna Castillo, at that time national organizer of the book club and former Comadres board member, said, "We are launching the book club to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to stores and to support our writers. Now more than ever, we need to support our Latino authors. We encourage you to join our local book club in your city or time zone. We have clubs in 12 cities. They are meeting virtually. There is sure to be one that can fit your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? For more information about our book club, visit our website at latinolit.com. We started these Tally conferences, Reading with Las Comadres, in October of 2006. We are in our 14th year. We created the Reading with Las Comadres Tally conferences and book club in an effort to entice everyone to read more Latino authors, to learn about Latino roots and different perspectives on Latino cultures and heritage. Our book club and Tally conferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. So please invite others to join us. We are very grateful to the publishers Harper Perennial and Penguin Random House for their support of this Tally conference with free books. For more information about the authors and publishers, visit our website at latinolit.com. Our Book of the Month author, Yaffa Santos, will be interviewed by Edith Reyes. Let's learn a little bit about Yaffa. Yaffa S. Santos was born and raised in New Jersey. A solo trip to Dominican Republic in her teenage years changed her relationship to her Dominican heritage and sparked a passion for cooking and its singular ability to bring people together. Yaffa is a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College, where she studied writing and visual art. She is a member of RWA. She has lived in New York, Philadelphia, Santo Domingo, and now lives in Florida with her family. Our interviewer, Edith Reyes, has been involved with Las Comadres since its early days. Comadre Edith, take it away.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I actually was former national project manager of the book club. Currently, I am the San Antonio book club facilitator here. And yes, it was a difficult week for sure. The cold got us. Yaffa, thank you so much for joining us and having us talk about your book. Super excited to talk about it.
Thank you, Edith, and thank you for having me.
Now, Yaffa, for those that haven't had a chance to read the book yet, tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. Well, A Taste of Sage is about Lumi Santana. She's a chef with a gift. She can perceive a person's emotions just by tasting their cooking. She takes a chance and puts her heart and her money into opening a Dominican fusion restaurant in Inwood, which is Upper Manhattan, New York City. The restaurant offers a mix of Dominican cuisine and basically any other food that she is interested in. When her well-loved but financially unviable venture fails, she finds herself needing to take a position as a sous chef at Dax, which is a traditional French restaurant owned by Julian Dax, who's a semi-celebrity chef known for his bad temper as much as his cooking skills. Her plan is to just do what she needs to do to get through and get out of there. But she wasn't planning to taste his cooking. So when she tastes his cooking, she finds that she isn't prepared to know what she finds out about his emotions.
Okay,
and
great.
It goes from there.
So, great. Thank you, Yaffa. Now, I got to admit, like, I don't even know where to start. There's a couple of things that I'm really curious about. You do put some recipes on there. You share some recipes. And I was wondering, how did you go about selecting these particular recipes? Were they one of your favorites? Were they ones that piqued your interest? How did you pick the recipes that you included in this book?
Well, for the Dominican recipes, they were things that I enjoy cooking and had also added to the book. So my challenge in writing the recipes, though, was cooking and then writing it down because I had not learned to cook with recipes. So there were a lot of things that when I went, for example, one of the first recipes is a sancocho, which is like a stewed meat and root vegetable stew. And I didn't know how much water I used. I didn't know how much meat I used. I had to cook it and then measure it out. Okay, how much water did I just put in here? I just had a big caldero, like a big pot, and I would fill it. I had this one pot that I got in Haiti, which is it had like a print on the inside that said "I love Jesus." So my thing was like I'd fill it up to the "I love Jesus" line. But you can't write that in the recipe. You can't fill it up to the "I love Jesus" line. So I had to fill up the "I love Jesus" line and then take out the water and say, okay, that's 10 cups of water, because otherwise I would not have known. So it was a process. And then for some of the other ones, like some of the French recipes, I mean, that's not something that's from my background. What I did for those is I found sources and I used sources, other cookbooks and some of them were websites. They're all referenced in the book, except ones that I already, had the experience making. Like there was a tomato sorbet. That's something that I had tried and kind of experimented with. But the other ones, they're referenced because that's something that I had to, have some support with since I wasn't used to those.
Now, was it difficult for you to pick the recipes? Like, was there, like, you had 20 recipes and you picked 5 or, whatever amount it were? Was it difficult for you to pick the ones that you wanted?
Not really. I wrote the scenes first, and then I added the recipes for the foods that were in the scenes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned how Lumi has this gift where if she can taste the food, she has a connection with how the cook is feeling, or the person that's preparing the food is feeling, and transmit it into the food, and you kind of sense it, right? What made you write about that? Like, is it someone that you know that kind of lives that way, that has that gift, or is it something that you looked up? What made you include that?
There's nobody that I know that has that gift, but I started out with the idea for the book with a woman chef who is working and living in Manhattan, having her own business, and unfortunately not having it go well. I think that I added that just because that's my personality. I'm very interested in the spiritual. I'm very interested in what's beyond the 5 senses. So at some point, I kind of started thinking, what can I add to the story that extends out into that realm? Because that's what really keeps me interested in the story when I'm writing out for myself.
And was there something that helped you write a little bit more about it? Did you have to research a little bit on that? Was there a movie or a book that kind of helped you to kind of look into that more? Because it actually made me really curious. And I was like, I wonder if she read a book or saw a movie that maybe I can look up.
I think that another aspect of curiosity started with my son. He has autism, and when he was younger, he would say things like, this song is orange, or this bread is angry. So when he was younger, my first thought, being conditioned like most of us are, is, that's nonsense. But then I started to think, wait a minute, maybe he's perceiving something that's there, but I just don't get it because I'm not privy to that or I'm not attuned to that information, and it made me very curious.
Okay. Now, Lumi being Dominican, a Dominican American chef, and in the book you make it so that she's interested in Dominican fusion. You yourself, have you experienced and tasted and like have had the Dominican fusion? Is there a certain place that you feel like, okay, this is a really good example of what were you thinking about when you were writing the book?
Actually, yes. When I lived in Upper Manhattan, there was a Dominican sushi restaurant. It was called Mama Sushi. And
really?
They would make, yes, they would make all different kinds of sushi, but with Dominican ingredients. So, for example, my favorite roll that they had was one that included Dominican salami, plátano, and avocado.
Interesting. Do you know if it still exists?
As far as I know, it still exists. Yes, I'm not sure what they're doing with the situation, but last I had checked, yes, they were still there.
Oh, I'm from New York, so whenever I go to visit my mom, I might have to take my mama to go check it out.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now, what made you pick Julian to be French Canadian? Like, why not? I don't know. I'm living in Texas, so why not some guy from Texas, who has a barbecue restaurant? Like, what made you pick French Canadian?
I worked in Manhattan in the service industry for a number of years, and where I worked, I was surrounded by a lot of French restaurants. To me, to have like a typical French chef, at least it seems kind of cliche to me, but I still had the feeling that she's going to work at a traditional French restaurant, and it had to be somebody that was still in their heritage and that would still be important for them to uphold French cooking traditions to the point of not allowing anything else. So that kind of made sense to me. Also, I lived in New York for a while, and I would travel a lot to Montreal, and it was kind of a way to include a city, even if marginally so, but it was a way to include a city that had become dear to my heart.
That's good. Now, fiction writing, is it something that you've done for a really long time, something that you really like to do? And if so, why? Why do you like fiction writing?
Yes, it's definitely something that I like to do. I first started working on a novel about 10 years ago. The first novel I worked on, I put aside for a bit and then started working on a piece of stage. But I think I like it because I like psychology. I like thinking about people's minds, how they work, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and how they show what they're feeling, and all of that goes into writing fiction.
Now, do you have a specific writing process? Like, do you, for example, sometimes if I write something, I want to write things in a bullet point, and then I kind of add to it. Do you write like a certain scene that kind of comes to mind and then you build off of that scene? What's your writing process like?
I like to go in order. I like to make an outline for the plot. Now, how much I follow that outline is totally different, but it gives me an idea of how to proceed. I also like to do journal entries for my characters. Sometimes I have a hard time getting a handle on what they're feeling in a scene or where their emotions are going. I'll do some journal entries for them where, I write a journal entry as the character to kind of get new ideas for what their emotions are in any given point of the book.
Our Denver chapter sent a question, and their question is, what is the symbolism of sage in your story? Is it significant to your own life?
It's just an herb that I had kind of known for a while as having, being a palate cleanser, and also in certain circles it's thought to have cleansing properties. It also occurred to me as something that Julian could be planting as a child in the summers in Canada. It's really more that I just liked sage. I wouldn't say that it has a specific significance. I mean, cooking for my family, I don't cook a lot, and my family leans a lot heavier towards traditional Dominican food. And if they find some sage in there, they probably freak out.
You're probably right. Okay. So one of the characters that I found interesting was Esme. She had, I guess, an obsession for Julian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found interesting about her was, how you developed the character in the story. What made you want to add that particular character in the book, and how much weight does she have in the story for you?
Well, something funny was that I started developing Lumi's stories separately, and then Julian and Esme were from another story. So in a sense, they already were in the same frame before I brought Lumi and Julian together. So that's kind of where Esme came in, and her role evolved over time, but ultimately it became important to me to have kind of a exchange of forgiveness between the two women.
Right. And that was pretty good, having to I guess when you shared that, people kind of own up to their faults and own up to being able to ask for forgiveness and the other one to forgive, right?
Sure. And also for Lumi to forgive and to not hold it against her. I think that, at some point there's a conversation between Lumi and Julian where he's saying, do you want me to, well, I think I said that he's going to press charge, whatever he wanted to kind of take it further to the next step. And Lumi had to say, she can't be held accountable for her emotions. I mean, she couldn't have known that Lumi had this gift. And how many of us go around thinking, it's like our job. How many of us are, working in the office thinking, like, I wish I could just push this printer out the window. You don't expect the printer to actually fly out the window. If that happened one day, you'd be, shocked. And that's kind of what happened to Esme. She's having her own emotions. She's not thinking they're going to have any effect outside of her mind, but then they do. And in a way, she couldn't have really expected that.
Now, Lumi's character, her mom is, which many people can relate to, right? Not everybody has a perfect mom. Not everybody has that endearing mom that is so supportive. And so Lumi not quite having the supportive mom. It was interesting when you wrote one phrase and said that her mom said, following dreams is what stupid people do, right? But regardless, you made Lumi a strong character to overlook and say, no, I'm still going to, no matter what, I'm going to try to continue to do what I need to do, right? And so how important was it for you to kind of bring that across? Because I think it is. I think it's important that, sometimes we have negative people in our lives, but we need to kind of not hear it and just keep going.
Absolutely. That's a message that I had repeatedly gotten from family members. I won't name any names, but well-meaning family members wanting to look out for me or siblings saying, don't bother going that route. People who go that route die of hunger, even with writing, saying, don't try to be a writer. You're going to die of hunger. I'm only saying this because I care about you. And having to kind of decide where to go with that information. As an adult, I think it's easier to be like, okay, thanks, moving on. But as a child, it's harder to kind of separate things out and say, okay, this is your belief. I'm, going to go another way. So I think that it is a testament to Lumi's strength because she had been hearing that since childhood. And for her to say, okay, that's your belief, I'm going to choose something else for myself. That's huge. And then to have made that huge leap and still have it not be successful, I think there's sometimes a belief in this culture, if you follow your dreams, everything will be okay. And it's not, at least in my observations, that's not always the way it works out. And I think that's also a huge growth step too, to say, okay, I gave it my all. It worked out differently than I thought. Okay, well, where do I go from here? It's a challenge.
Right. Right. And to me, I felt that you came across that way in the book really well, where you showed that, even when you're trying to follow your dreams, not everything goes perfectly, right? First time around, and yet you still just gotta keep trying, right? No matter what. Because sometimes people will come and tell you, "Oh, you see, that's what I meant. Why do you even bother? Look at what happened, right?" And you can give up. But I love that about the book, that you really made Lumi, even at times when she felt defeated, she kept chugging. She kept going, and so that was really good.
Absolutely. I think I wanted to add quickly that one thing that I got at feedback at some times was people said, "Oh, I think it would be so cute if she and Julian had a restaurant together at the end." And I felt very strongly, no, she needs to have her own place at the end. She has to go back to it and reinvent it, take what she learned from working at Dax, but make it better for her own business.
Which I thought that was really, really good, the way you did that. Now, Julian, such a strong person, and it's the way you portray Julian to be such a strong character person, yet have Lumi with just the smallest thing kind of melt him, right? Is that the romantic person in you to want to do that?
Absolutely. I think that he's a pretty romantic character, and I've gotten different opinions about this. Some people have said that they think he's like too machista, but for me, like a man that will cook for you, will constantly cook for you. Like that's not what I think of a man who's like super machista. So I think that myself and others have just had different opinions about this.
Right. So now, what's in the works for you next?
I'm working on a new project, which I hope to share more news about soon. But the main character that I have in mind is a ciguapa. That's a Dominican mythical creature that usually lives in the woods and has a few different features. One of the things that they're known for is for having feet that turn backwards. I have a story coming up about a ciguapa that is living in like the modern world and working in the baking industry. I do have a bunch of baking recipes that I'm excited to share, and she has a romance story as well.
Oh, so it's got a little mix of everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's
exactly.
good. That's good. Well, I hope when you write your next book, you'll think of us and come back.
I would love to. I'm so grateful to you for having me, and I feel in family here.
Oh, thank you, Yaffa. It was such a pleasure to read your book. Really like what you've done with the character. I love that, your emphasis on the Dominican fusion was quite interesting. So I really did appreciate it. And I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Edith.
Yeah. Karen?
Okay, our additional conversations with author is Paola Ramos. Paola Ramos was the Deputy Director of Hispanic Media for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign and a political appointee during the Barack Obama administration. And she also served in President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. She is former fellow at Emerson Collective. Ramos received her MA in Public Policy from the Harvard Kennedy School and her BA from Barnard College, Columbia University. She lives in Brooklyn. She's Mexican, Cuban, and American. Our interviewer, Comadre Kim Montoya, joined Las Comadres and Friends International Book Club Denver Network in 2013. Kim helped coordinate and market the book club and became the discussion leader. Kim retired in 2017 after 35 years of public service and moved to Topeka, Kansas. She started the Heartland Topeka Las Comadres and Friends Book Club in 2017, which covers Topeka, Lawrence, and Kansas City. For the last 5 years, Kim has been a judge for the annual Latino International Book Awards, and last year was a judge for the National Association of Hispanic Publications, Jose Marti Awards. Kim loves to read, travel, enjoy the outdoors, and photography. She hopes to one day write a book. Comadre Kim, take it away.
Thank you, Comadre Karen, and welcome, Paola. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's my honor. Thank you so much for having me. Truly, truly, truly happy to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you, and we want to congratulate you on your debut book.
Thank you so much. I know. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, how did this happen? So it still feels very exciting.
Oh, I bet. Well, I wanted to let you know that you are a very good writer and a wonderful storyteller. I truly enjoyed reading your book. I got hooked on it, and I could not put it down until I was done reading it. So it was just one of those books that just really, grabbed a reader. I wanted to, share with you that I have to admit that I'm one of those individuals who has struggled to understand the term Latinx. And that's probably because I grew up as a baby boomer. And I was, looking today of all of the different terms, the baby boomers, the Gen X's, et cetera. And it was like, okay, we've come a long way. But I grew up in the eras of terms like, mestizo and chicano and chicana, and I worked in, federal service and civil rights, and we used the term Hispanic, which was inclusive of all the Latin American countries. And then the terms Latino and Latina came out, and now Latinx. So we continue to evolve as a population.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So no, go ahead, please.
No, please, go ahead, Paula.
No, I was just going to address that. I think part of, I think the reality is that Latinx is an incredibly controversial term, right? And so I would be lying if I said that, even everyone that I interviewed in the book and that everyone around me likes the term. I'm very much aware that it is, that it has its problems, and that's precisely why I wanted to write the book, right? I think the one thing that
Yeah. We have several questions for you, but before we get started on the questions, would you please give our listeners just a brief synopsis of your book?
Of course, yeah. So Finding Latinx essentially is a cross-country journey that I took from coast to coast, and it was pretty much in search of sort of the new generation of Latinos that are in this country, right? What prompted me to write this book was this idea that even after I had worked in politics for all these years, right, even after I myself believed that I knew the United States, that I knew my people, that I knew myself even, I went back to these states and back to these cities that I thought I knew, and I talked to everyone that I had never talked to in my life, right? So Latinx is sort of a story where I find myself, right? I understand what it means to be queer and Latina and, live within these stereotypes. And it's also a book where I find all of the voices that were always around me: Afro Latinos, queer Latinos, trans Latinos, indigenous Latinos, Midwestern Latinos. And so it's sort of a picture of what I believe is the new Latino voice. Okay,
good. Yeah, so you took this road trip, and I'm really happy that you put that road map in there. But why did you choose to approach the book this way, the way you did, by documenting your journey around the country, and why did you choose the areas you did and the individuals that you encountered?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had worked in D.C. for a while. I worked in the Clinton campaign, and so a lot of my work took me to battleground states. I was in Texas a lot, Nevada, Florida. And so the intention of sort of this roadmap and where I end up going was to go back to these battleground states that, again, I thought I knew politically, that I thought I knew the community there, but I didn't, right? A big lesson learned for me, at least from the 2016 election, right, where I was sort of expecting, Latinos, the Latinx community, to show up in overwhelming numbers. A big lesson learned from that night and from that campaign is that didn't happen, right? Like less than 50% of Latinos actually showed up to vote in 2016 against Donald Trump. Politics aside, right? It was still a really low number. And so I wanted to go back to to Nevada, and talk about immigrants in a different way. I wanted to talk to the indigenous migrants that we're going through. I wanted to go back to Texas, and instead of just focusing on the wall, which is typically what I would do, and instead of focusing on immigration, I wanted to focus on Latinas that were fighting for their own reproductive justice, right, or their own HIV crisis that's happening at the border. And I went, obviously, to Florida, where I'm from, but I saw a different city, a city that I hadn't even seen myself while I was growing up there. I talked to Afro-Cubans. I talked about climate change, and so that's a little bit of what inspired the cities.
Okay, yeah, so you say the battleground states now. Just another question. Do you think that you would find similar stories in other states, like Pacific Northwest?
So, I mean, the thing is, the way I see it is the sort of the book that I wrote is just 1% of the story. No, there's thousands of stories, and right. I think the point of the book is to tell people and to tell everyone, the media, myself, people in politics, Latinos and non-Latinos, that we're everywhere. No, we're not just at the border. We're not just in Florida. And we're in the Midwest. We're in the Pacific Northwest. And we're in the Northeast. And so, I think if there is a round two, I think the idea would be to expand beyond the sort of battleground states that we're always talking about.
Yeah. You define Latinx in many ways, by sharing the voices and the stories of the individuals that you encountered in your journey. And as you define Latinx, you also paint a picture of the challenges the Latin community continues to face and how these individuals are keeping true to themselves and how they're changing America, like within their own community. Is this what you were striving for when you started writing the book, or did it evolve this way?
I mean, I think it, I went in with a very open mind, and the intention was actually, the intention at the beginning was, and what my job now is, I'm a journalist right now with Vice. I've been with Telemundo for a long time, and so my intention at the beginning was I'm going to ask as many questions as I can, And then it sort of shifted in the middle of the writing process, and it became more of a listening tour. And there was a moment, I think it was when I was in South Carolina, or I was in Georgia, and I was embedding there with the indigenous Maya community that has migrated there. And there was a moment there where I realized that my job, or the best job and the best tool that I had, was simply to listen, and just to listen to people and stop asking so many questions and sort of build that trust that way. And so, it did evolve. I think the goal for me, because it's a book that was published 2 weeks before the election, my goal was for people to pick up the book and sort of see, for those that had never seen themselves or never sort of felt part of this community, I wanted them to feel like they were part of it. For those that felt like they were never inspired to sort of vote, regardless of your political party, I wanted those folks to vote because they believed, that they could in some way impact change. And then I wanted politicians and campaigns to sort of read the book, if possible, or at least hear about it and understand that they haven't even figured out, who we are as a voting bloc, right? So that was the intention.
Well, I just loved a lot of the people that you encountered along your journey. Just the stories, about all of these individuals, and then there was even some where you were at a certain area, and then you were talking to maybe a gentleman, and then somebody said, well, now you got to go, go see over there, or go to that person, or go to that place, and you found another, individual and another story. And I think that's what I really enjoyed about your book. It was like, when I was reading it, it was like I was there with you, talking to these individuals. That's how I felt when I was reading your book. Do you feel that maybe people understand the term Latinx, and do you see Latinx as a true movement really making a difference within our community and country, or that's what you would like to see change?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the midst of having a conversation that
is defining what this word is. I think the beauty and sort of the complexity of the word is that it's not just a word, it's talking about Latinx, is talking about a community, but it's also forcing us to talk about policy in a different way, right? It's forcing people to, when they think of us, to not just talk about immigration all day, right? But to talk about criminal justice and climate change and the economy. And I think it's an issue in a word that is creating a movement in the sense that at least what I saw this summer and what I've been seeing the past sort of 2 years is a sort of awakening in the younger generations of Latinos that are kind of sick and tired of this normalized pain that the older generation of Latinos has gone through, right? And in that sense, I do see more openness. I do see an attempt to be more inclusive among us. And I do see us being more active politically, right? If you just look at Congress is starting to look very different. You may hate or love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but she's changing, what Congress looks like. Suddenly, I'm from New York. We have a member of Congress that is a queer Afro-Latino. That's changed, And so in that sense, I do think Latinx is able to capture this moment in a way that the word Hispanic didn't, in a way that Latino perhaps has not, simply because it's a gendered word. And so, yeah, in that sense, I feel like we're heading in a new direction. Is Latinx going to stay forever? I don't know, maybe not. And I don't think it's the best word. I do think at least it is the first word that attempts to see us all under the same light. And then I think it's interesting, there is a lot of pushback, and there is a lot of anger around this word, particularly I've noticed, particularly among Latino men. And that to me is very interesting, right? Is there something that causes concern, right, when we realize that there are, trans Latinos amongst us, right, and that there's over 3 million Afro Latinos amongst us, and that
this opened up a lot of conversations, because as I was reading it, it's like, oh my God, I have so many questions for Paola. I think I would like to just sit down with you and just continue talking, because there is so much, that I would love to ask you. And it does open up a lot of conversation. And so I'm glad that, you wrote this book and that you have opened our eyes to a lot of things that, we knew some of this stuff was going on in some of the areas that, you documented, but there was other things that I did not know, so it does really.
And I'm constantly learning.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to just, constantly learn about one another and, love and respect one another and value what we bring, to our community. There was a question from one of our, actually it's from Kansas City, that wanted to know who is the individual pictured on the cover of your book?
Oh, that actually is a photographer, Adam Perez, and he took that photo. And so I was looking the story of the cover of finding the photo for the cover. I went through many different photos, and first it looked like there were no photos. It looked more like a drawing. Then I went back to the photos, and I wanted to do a photo from one of the protests that happened this summer, where there were so many Latinos that were marching. And then Adam Perez, who's an incredible photographer, I was looking at his website, and I saw the image of this man, and his eyes, to me, like the gaze in that photo, and it just made me so curious to know more about this person. And he wanted to remain anonymous, and he is a Latino that lives in California. Is the only thing that that I sort of was able to share. But to me, it was just the gaze of his eyes, and then this idea that he looks masculine, but he also looks sort of feminine, and he can sort of morph in many different stories. And it just made me very curious to at least like open this book and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, talking about photographs. I love that you also included different photographs of different people and art and just everything that you encountered along the way. That made it, I think, the stories more personal. And then also, you know, the titles of your chapters. How did you come up with those?
Oh, that was, I mean, again, this has been what I will say about the photos. It's all a disposable camera. So it was like literally like a $15 camera that I just traveled with. Yeah, I know, but they and now when I'm doing my my stories, I'm actually talking to you from the border right now. I'm in Matamoros, and I travel with a disposable camera, and I feel like it just captures it like it just, anyways. You don't need like a $200 camera ever. So that was through that. I mean the chapters were I wanted them to be short, but also kind of like intriguing. I didn't want to tell you exactly what was about to happen, but it also wanted to make a statement. The reality is that writing the book, obviously, it's my first book, no, and so it was the process for me was very foreign, and I would for each story I would go to the field, and for each chapter I would go to the field, do the interviews, then go back to New York, which is where I live, write the chapter, and then I would go back to the field, and I did that back and forth 12 times, right? And at least for the 11 chapters that are there, well, they were 11, and so then going back and forth with the editors was a whole interesting project. It's like tearing it apart and moving things and the puzzle and this. So I learned a lot.
Well, that's good. I know because I think a lot of us, Las Comadres, we love to read, and there's several of us who are interested in writing books. There's some that have already written books, and I think a lot of us sometimes are really curious about, how the authors go about, writing and, and what lessons have they learned, because we can learn from you guys as well.
No, I mean, I wish, I wish I would have asked more questions at the beginning, because I truly went at it like without any understanding. I basically was given like 9 months to write this book, right? Which now looking back and from what I hear, that's a pretty tight deadline. And so as I said, to me the most important thing, and what I promised myself I would do, is that I didn't want to do a single interview by the phone, right? That I wanted to be in person with every single character that I interviewed, and that I wanted to sort of feel what they were feeling and see what they were seeing. And so that's what made it sort of, that was the complexity of it. It was just like traveling to all of these states and being present and recording and then going back and writing. I also do think, and I wonder how you feel about this and how others do, but there's always this sense of like imposter syndrome, where like, and maybe it's among Latinas, like, but there was always this sense of like, it's not good enough, or this doesn't make sense. And that always creeps in. And so I think it took a lot of months to just sort of, put that aside and just be like, you're writing this book, get it done.
Yeah. Well, you did, like I said, an excellent book, and you're an excellent storyteller, because I just felt, after reading some of the chapters that, I too felt like I started to know these individuals on a personal level. So, you did a great job there. So what do you want the readers to walk away with? What is the takeaway? If a person to read this book, what do you want them to walk away with?
So I guess a couple of things. Right now, I think just a little bit more of empathy, right? I think, and I include myself in that, I think there's often this question of, particularly now, in particular about after the election, there's this question of, is there even such a thing as the Latino community, the Latinx community, right? Can we actually claim that we are one, right? Or is this all sort of based on this false premise? And I've been thinking about that a lot, and then I think about our story, and I think about the one thing that does connect all of us, regardless of how old we are, the color of our skin, our gender, how we identify. The one thing that makes us unique is that there is someone in our family or somewhere down our generation and down the family tree that migrated to this country with one idea in mind, and that was just to find a little bit more freedom here than what we left behind. And to me, that story at least means that in our bones and in our DNA, we are empathetic people. And I think it's so easy to forget that in this like insane political moment we're in. And I feel like we've been living in these sort of like sections, and where we sort of we've lost track of that. And so if we can all just be a little bit more empathetic, and in that process sort of start looking at each other differently and with a little bit more curiosity, I think that can actually go a long way, because I think the problem is that we've sort of skipped these very basic questions of who we are for decades, right? I think the media has told our story forever. The story has been about immigration forever. The story has been told by so many people that we've skipped the most basic questions as to, like, who the hell are we, and how have we changed? And so if folks can read this book and just come at it with a little bit more empathy the next time that they meet someone that looks different or that has a different story, a different accent, a different gender, that would make me happy.
Yeah, I like that, and you're so right. We need more empathy in this country and more curiosity, and not to be afraid to meet another person, especially one who we think is, different from ourselves, or maybe we haven't seen before, or coming from another country. You hear somebody talking in their language. Why don't you go up there and introduce yourself and ask them, who are you? Where are you from? We don't do that, and we need to start doing more of that.
Yeah.
So, Paola, are there plans on the horizon for other books? I think you kind of mentioned maybe there might be one. Like you said, the next book. What's your next adventure?
Well, adventure. I've been since I wrote the book, I've been doing a lot of stories for Vice and for Showtime. I just did. I was just in the Colombia-Panama border, where that border is composed of El Darién, this jungle there. And, it's a part of the migration story that isn't being sort of told in the media, but essentially a lot of the migrants and asylum seekers that are coming to that want to seek asylum in the U.S. are going through this extremely dangerous jungle. They have to cross this border before they even make their way through Mexico. And so I spent some time there, 2 weeks, and that was one of the things I think one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the hardest stories I've ever told. And so I plan on trying to continue to cover immigration and as many different angles as possible. I'm right now at the border, and so I'll be here for a while. And in terms of writing a book, I think my dream would be to create a docuseries out of this book, or at least the concept of this book, and that would be sort of my next step. And then what's sparked a lot of curiosity in terms of the writing is understanding the impact of misinformation and disinformation among us. And I think there's been a lot of damage done, and I can see the damage still continue to be played out among us about, whether it's COVID or politics. And so I really want to dig into that and see if it's potentially explore the idea of writing a book about the spread of misinformation in our community.
Well, that's funny that you say that, because there were several of us comadres that thought that your book would make a great documentary or a mini docuseries, and so I really hope that you pursue that, because I think that would be awesome. And
thank you. That means a lot.
We'll learn, because there's like people that like to read, and I think there's a lot of people that are more visual. So by doing something like this, I think you would really open up our eyes to the whole population, and I think it would just be wonderful. And you can do it maybe, I know Hispanic Heritage Month, comes up, in between September and October, so maybe, that would be a way to start it. Well, thank you for spending time with us this evening. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for a great book, and just really opening our eyes to a term that I know, because I struggle with it. There's other people I've had conversations with, and I think you just really opened up our eyes to a great deal. So thank you so much.
No, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the space a lot, and hola a todas las comadres. So thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Karen?
Kim. Yeah, I got it, Kim. It's Julia. Okay. Comadres Yaffa, Paola, Edith, Kim, and Karen, we are so grateful for the insightful interviews and for spending time with us this evening. We enjoyed the sharing of perspectives and insights from your work and your life. We treasure the opportunity to learn about you, and we truly feel more connected to you. We thank Harper Perennial and Penguin Random House for their support of this teleconference and for their generous gift of books for winners of early registration. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us for this teleconference, and thank you for those that submitted questions. We'd also like to thank Comadre Maria Ferrer for the media coordination and the Twitter chat, Once again, to Comadre Dora Abreu for the web work that she does for us. Without this volunteer leadership team, this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias. Please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, etc. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as other readers. Buy books to support our authors, and if your library does not have a book you want to read, ask them to order it. And please, attend your local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. Remember, it's open to everyone, men and women, and not just Latinos. Our book of the month for March is The Cipher by Isabella Maldonado, published by Thomas Mercer. And our additional conversations with book is Spirit Run by Noé Alvarez, published by Catapult. Our teleconference for March will be held on Monday, March 29th, 2021. Once again, we are keeping you all in our thoughts and prayers through these times. Thank you again for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature. Mil gracias to all. Stay safe. Buenas noches.